Guys, how you doing? It's Load the Box. It's Jordan. It is Will. We're back tonight, or today, I guess, to talk about where the experts, so-called, air quotes, experts, have the Vikings going in this upcoming draft. Now, I want to preface all of this by saying I am always on team trade down. Especially with the Vikings' lack of picks in this draft. I think that you can get good value moving out of that first-round pick. But let's say, gun to your head, you have to pick at 23 or 24, depending on who you look at. Some people still count the Dolphins, fair-fitted pick. We're going to talk about who some of these experts have us going with, and I'm going to start with my favorite of all the experts and all of the news outlets. That's the Draft Network. They are my go-to home to learn about these guys, and they haven't led me astray many times. They have the Vikings going with wide receiver out of Ohio State, Jackson Smith-Njigba. Will, I'll let you talk about what kind of a player he is, and would you make that pick if you were if you were Kwesi?
Yeah, this is an exciting one for me because watching him in the I guess it would have been calendar year 2022 Rose Bowl. I'm not sure if you remember that game against Utah.
I do.
It was a wild 60-50 type game. Ohio State came back from a big deficit. I'm not an Ohio State fan by any stretch, but watching Smith-Njigba put on a show in that game, I think put his name on the national spotlight. And I do think that, and we'll talk about this a lot more next week with Vikings trade and free agent wide receiver targets, but I am a big proponent of the Vikings going and getting another wide receiver. I'm not so convinced that it should be in the draft, however. I'm not against the idea, but I think something that I really want to see the Vikings get is a deep threat. And I want to see someone who has just high level explosion. And I think something that Njigba, he had the ability to go over the top at Ohio State for sure. But I think it almost feels like he might be just Justin Jefferson light in his ability to run routes, hands catch, those kind of things. So that might be where I hesitate a little bit. I know Zay Flowers is one that some other people have projected the Vikings going to get.
Yes.
I've also seen some Percy Harvin comparisons with that guy, and so that could be interesting, an interesting, exciting.
He's definitely got
grab.
that just that quick twitchiness. This is Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers excites me. From who do I think will have the longer highlight reel? I think it might be Zay Flowers because he seems electric. But I really like that you said Jackson Smith-Njigba reminds you of Justin Jefferson light, because that's exactly what I was going to say was, what does this, draft report sound like? Not elite, probably should play in the slot, not an elite speed guy, should probably play in the slot, makes a lot of hand catches, pretty good route runner. We don't know about his ability to go over the top and win contested it's spooky almost how much it reminds me of Justin Jefferson. And I did not like Justin Jefferson as a prospect, and because I didn't like Jefferson and he toned into Justin Jefferson, I am now I don't like Jackson Smith-Njigba, but I feel like I should hop on the train. Yeah. So I'm not incorrect about him like I was with Jefferson, because I was very wrong about Justin Jefferson. But
it's also it's hard to pinpoint because, especially with Njigba, he only had really one full season. And so to look at, it's kind of like Kyler Murray. He had, I guess, maybe a couple of seasons, but these guys who are they explode for a season, but then there's kind of just injuries or whatever, transfer or whatever. And so, it's like a lot of things in the draft. You're making an educated guess. And if just really quick, and then we can go to other positions, other players, but if you could pick one, Flowers or Smith-Njigba, who would you rather have?
I would pick Flowers, because I think that we have Justin Jefferson, and I think Njigba might have that upside maybe, but I think Flowers just would bring a different element that isn't currently on this offense. KJ Osborne isn't going to do anything that Zay Flowers can do in terms of how quick and just it really is twitchiness. But there's one guy who I would be remiss if I didn't talk about. I'm going to skip around on our list that we have here. I don't know if this guy will be here for the Vikings to take. But CBS Sports, they actually had two of their experts whose names I did not write down. They had them both do a mock draft, and they both had the Vikings going defensive tackle. One of them was Keon White, who was out of Georgia Tech, and the other one was Kalijah Cansey out of Pitt. I don't know a ton about Keon White. He's not somebody that I've seen going in the first round a lot. Kalijah Cansey, however, kind of caught my eye whenever I think Mel Kipo had him going inside of the top 10. The guy's a physical, like, he's a freak. He lives in backfields. I hate to make, he went to Pitt, so I hate to say, like, oh, Aaron Donald. But, like, my God, he's a little bit smaller, a little bit undersized. He just manhandles people. He rushes the passer at an insane rate. If Kalijah Cansey is there at 23, there's a 0% chance I would trade my draft. I would trade a pick and not take him. I would take him at 23, and I would try and trade next year's draft capital to move up and take more guys this year. I want Kalijah Cansey to be a Viking so bad. What do you think a John Randall could do on this Vikings defense, especially now with Brian Flores? And do you think it would be a mistake to not go with a defensive back in this spot?
You kind of put the words in my mouth, because the two positions that I think the Vikings really should go after in the draft are cornerback and defensive tackle. You can make an argument for safety. You can make an argument for linebacker. I prefer the Vikings to hang on to their current safeties, Lewis Seen, Harrison Smith, Josh Metellus, have those three guys kind of be their safeties. See what Cam Bynum can do in the slot, quite frankly. I don't want to see him at safety anymore. But I want the Vikings to go get a veteran to play linebacker alongside Brian Asamoah, and I want them to improve at defensive tackle and cornerback in the draft. And so I think, you look at all these teams that are still going, the Eagles, the Chiefs, obviously those two that are in the Super Bowl, they have big-bodied, physical, aggressive defensive tackles that can throw people, like you're saying. The Vikings need to have somebody who can put interior pressure on the quarterback and just swallow up run games. It's not really something we've had probably since Pat Williams, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And it hurts. It hurts the defense without that sort of interior presence. So I'm with you. I think getting someone of that caliber at that point in the draft would be a steal. You go for it, and you see what you have, because they can't continue to operate with these sort of bargain bin grabs at defensive tackle. Yeah,
I agree with that. I still think that one of the biggest free agency losses the Vikings have had in my lifetime was Tom Johnson, who was low-key really, really good at like creating havoc on the interior defensive line, and we lost him, and we never really got that chaos maker back in the interior defensive line. We got some run stuffers, but I think Kalijah Cansey presents an opportunity to, have a true pass rusher who's also going to be good in the run. Like he's going to be a very good defensive tackle. There are some other names that we'll talk about later that are at defensive tackle who interest me, but there's one guy who keeps getting mocked to the Vikings over and over again by like 5 or 6 different sources, and that's South Carolina's Cam Smith. He's a defensive back, and especially after the Brian Flores hiring, Cam Smith he looks more and more like a Minnesota Viking every time I watch his tape, because he is just physical at the line. He is kind of mean. He plays. I heard somebody compare him. They said he'll follow you through the tunnel into the bathroom. He's just mean. He's got a mean streak to him, and I think that's what Brian Flores' defense calls for. Another guy who I'll throw in here really quickly is Kelee Ringo. I'm not quite sure. I've heard it pronounced both ways. He was a defensive back out of Georgia, had a lot of draft hype to be like a top 10 guy going into the season. And the best description I've heard of him came from Pro Football Focus, when they said he plays like he is guessing when he's out there, because he's aggressive, and he, if he thinks a wide receiver's running a slant, the wide receiver won't run that slant. He'll beat the wide receiver. But if the wide receiver isn't running a slant, he will get beaten pretty bad. So he's kind of a second round guy that some people still think might go in the first. But what do you think a true first round talent cornerback? How do you think that could affect? Do you think that's a need with a Caleb Evans and Andrew Booth coming back off of injury? I mean, what's kind of your perspective?
Yes, because you can never have too many cornerbacks, as Mike Zimmer would always tell us, right? I mean, if you watched the Vikings at all in 2022, you realize that these guys drop like flies. And I mean, they went through Patrick Peterson, Cam Dantzler, Caleb Evans, Andrew Booth, Duke Shelley, Chris Boyd was out there for a few snaps. Um, Chandon Sullivan obviously played in the slot, but you can never have too many of these guys. And so if you already have Booth, Evans, and Dantzler on the roster, of course you need more. And if you can bring in a hungry rookie, like either of those two guys with just aggression and something to prove, and somebody who is going to get up and be, physical at the line of scrimmage, I think that's huge. And we talked about Duke Shelley on one of our recent shows when we were talking about Brian Flores. Obviously, he's a free agent, and the Vikings would have to bring him back. But I think Duke Shelley, like you've always said, he's got that dog. And
He's a dog.
If you bring him back, I think his sort of just angst and anger would probably make him fit this whole Flores scheme really well, because frankly, in the whole Ed Donachelle defense, he kind of looked out of place. He was almost so aggressive and so angry and so just out there that the whole soft defense that the Vikings were rolling out there just didn't really seem like, even though he excelled in it, didn't really seem like he kind of fit in. So I think he actually, could add to that room as well. So long way of saying, go get a cornerback, bolster that room. You can never have too many of these guys. Somebody's going to get hurt. It's just the way the position works.
Yeah, I think I sent you a mock draft I did where I took Hodges Tomlinson out of TCU, who stands at like 5'9". I always assume that they're about an inch shorter than what their draft profile says, because that's what the school says. So a 5'10" corner is probably 5'9" or 5'8". And I text you and I was like, I either want my defensive backs to be 6'3" or 5'9", because they're either going to be physical specimens that are very tall and can, tip the ball and just use that length to their advantage, or they're just going to play like angry chihuahuas and they're going to bite ankles, and they're going to, as Dan Campbell, I guess I should stop loving Dan Campbell since they're like our main competition for the division next year. As Dan Campbell would say,
it's all about respect. It's okay to respect
it is.
him.
And he said that they were going to bite kneecaps in Detroit, and I like for my defensive backs to be out there biting kneecaps, because I like when they play that way. And you know who else loves that? Brian Flores, defensive coordinator of the Vikings. Last guy, I want to bring up two names that I keep seeing mocked to the Vikings. Christian Gonzalez, the corner out of Oregon, and there's another one, Devin Witherspoon, out of Illinois. Neither of them are getting outside of the top 12. Stop mocking them to the Vikings. That's a pipe dream. That's like doing a mock draft a couple years ago. I'd always get these mock drafts where Tua Tagovailoa would fall to like 25 where the Vikings were picking. And I would never take him, because it ruins the entire mock drafting experience. There's no shot that either one of those guys are falling. They're the best two defensive backs in this class. They're both elite level talents. They're not Sauce Gardner level, but they are a tier below Sauce Gardner. They're both going to be very, very good defensive backs for bad football teams next year. So stop mocking them to the Vikings. That's kind of my final thoughts on it. I'll let you get something and then I'll close this out. Does that sound good?
Yeah. I honestly want to, my final thought, I'm going to let it just be a question. What do you think about, I already kind of gave my thoughts on this, but what do you think about getting a safety? I've seen a couple people talking about the Vikings going and getting a safety in the draft. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't like it. Why? Why are we doing that? We have Harrison Smith, and I get he's getting old, but you drafted Lewis Seen last season with the last pick of the first round. He has to play this year. And you have to roll him out. And if he's bad, then you have to own up to, we made a mistake. And if he doesn't play next season, it's because he's not good. And it's because they don't like what they see from him in practice. So I don't think safety is a position. I mean, look, once you get into like the fifth round, take the best guy that you can. Just try and get a stud in the making. Excuse me. But in the first 3 or 4 rounds, I have no interest in taking a safety. I think that Bynum is a solid enough safety. If Bynum or Metellus, Seen and Smith, if that's our safety room in 2023, I feel like that's the strength of the defense. just because I think that Scene is going to be good. I think that Smith is still good, and I think Metellus is a really quality backup. So I don't think safety is something that I would be targeting super heavily going into this draft. But are you good if I close this out?
Yeah, I mean, hey, let me try the sponsors this time. So,
Yeah.
you know, this is my first time doing this, everybody. So,
Here we go.
You know, cut me some slack. You know, check out VikingsTerritory.com. Read my blog, the Bad Loser blog. I just wrote a piece about Kirk Cousins and a contract extension. Super spicy. Go look it up.
Oh boy.
Like I said, VikingsTerritory.com, PurplePTSD.com. Always shop Unified Athletic Wear. Follow Jordan on Twitter at LTB Vikings / us on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter at Will Badlose. I think that's everything. Did I cover everything?
I think you did everything. You called a big
Sweet.
audible there, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. I'm gonna watch you blossom before my eyes.
This is my moment, Jordan. I am coming into my own.
It was beautiful.
Anyway.
It was a sight to see, and this is why last week I gave you a little trophy that I made, giving you an award for like best broadcast or whatever. But
that was a big moment for me.
I think that it's there's going to be a lot of people that think the Vikings have to fix the defense with their first pick this season. I disagree. I think that if the right wide receiver is there, you take them and you really lean into this offense thing. I think that you can find guys to run the defense at an average level in free agency and in the second, third, fourth rounds. So I trust Kwesi. He hasn't done anything to, make me distrust him yet. So I'm excited to see what happens. But we'll be talking about quarterbacks later this week in what should be a fun episode, at least for me. I'm sure it's going to be a nightmare for Will. But, I've been Jordan. He's been Will. We'll see you guys later. Skol, y'all.